Hi everybody, can you see me? Can you hear me? Do let me know. And let's see on this this chat latency today. Hopefully it will improve on what we've already had. So hi Tish, hi Mark. Diane's with us as well, and Susano. So welcome one and all. Hello Tish. Who else we got? Anel. Hi John Ford. John and Karen, Tampa. Hi KCM. Linda's with us. Hi Linda. And just so we can just try and get just my head round the kind of chat where we're at now. I'm going to say something. Let's say so. If somebody type York Minster, please. Let's see how long it takes to come through. Oh, good. So it does. Thank you. It looks like the chat situation seems to have been somewhat. Yeah, I never try and overlap with Florent because I mean I know he's got so many people that adore his Parisian stuff. There's certain guides that I wouldn't say I deliberately clash with, but there's certain guys that I'd always try not to clash with, and Flo would certainly be one of those. So I'm glad that you've been able to enjoy both. Hi Tanzian. Good detail. It's not a name I recognise, but I'm not sure if everybody's still got the same names they had, of course, on Hago. But not that you should, of course. But it's a whole new world, isn't it? So it's a rather nice sunny afternoon. Town is really busy here, but hopefully we'll be in places that are a bit quieter. Is my volume, everything okay? Am I sort of coming through nice and clear? I know. I wouldn't make you choose, Linda. I'm not that. I'm not that type, am I? I'm not jealous. I know you see other guides, but that's nice. There's variety, isn't it? I mean, that's what I always thought about Hago. Wasn't just that I've got an audience or Ian's got an audience or Patrick has. Is that you like to experience the best of what's out there, and a veritable buffet of content from around the world served up delectably for you all. Hello, Bonnie. Good to see you. So we're almost at a time of live, and clear and not scarily loud today. Okay. It sort of depends where the mic is. I mean, obviously I can move it up a little bit. It's on my bag, so I've not got a jacket on today. So that's the little Mikey there. So that's the little chap that is. He's picking up what I say, so obviously I can move it up here if it was too quiet. I can move down there if it's too loud. So you just let me know if it feels about right. Smorgasbord, absolutely, yeah, smorgasbord. That's a great way of putting it. Particularly, of course, for this Nordic city of ours. Not talking too much Viking today, but we always like to reflect on the fact that we were at least, the Anglo-Scandinavian capital of the Danish Empire. So let me have a sip, and then I think we're about ready to go live, but haven't actually got a time check on today, but nonetheless, I think we are about there or thereabouts, as we say. So, welcome one and all. Sorry if I've kind of missed any of you. I've heard that one of the issues with the chat might have been people joining in later on in the tour and going back to the beginning. So obviously they were talking, but asking questions about stuff I had talked about earlier. So that may be an issue. So I don't know. But anyway, it seems to be behaving itself today. So let us kick on. So welcome, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome wherever you are. You're joining me here in York. And today is a nice day, lovely sunny, warm afternoon in York. Early evening, tea time, 5:30 here in York, probably 25 degrees. So very, very agreeable, not too hot. The streets are exceptionally busy, but I'm going to try and keep us in an area, hi Vera, that is a little bit quieter. Not least because obviously we're going around the Minster area, which by its nature tends to be a bit more quiet. There's something about the building and the place that brings out sort of, not a silence, but perhaps a contemplative element in people. So that's nice. So what I want to talk about today really is not just simply the Minster, although we're going to spend a good time looking at the Minster itself, is to think about the Minster as being the centre point of an ecclesiastical community, or of the several ecclesiastical communities that grew up here in York. We'll talk about why they kind of grew up. But it's important to realise we're not just talking about one building, we're talking about communities. And so you've got a variety of buildings with different purposes, different uses, and so forth. And I'm starting with this one, although I'm going to do it slightly differently. I've only done this tour once before, but trying to show you some things I didn't show you last time. But we're starting here by St Andrew Gate. And this looks like a church. Where's my switcher? There we are. Actually ceased being a church in the 1550s. And what's interesting about this church is not only has it been through a wide kind of variety of kind of uses. It's been a school. It's said to be a brothel at one time, which is kind of interesting for a former church. But it's the patching up of it. It kind of shows the ups and downs that we're going to talk for the most part, obviously, about the wealth and the power of York Minster and the Deano chapter. But then when you come in and look over here, you get some telltale clues. You see it's very, very badly missed stone. So almost everything in York is white magnesium limestone. And yet here, you can see here, we've got a red sandstone. So when it's come to repairing this church, they've not gone with quality materials. It's going to make do and mend. It's a patch-up. And it suggests that at some point there was trouble. There was trouble with the finances, with keeping abreast of the maintenance of these buildings. Now that's part of the kind of distant past, and now everything is maintained beautifully within the Minster Precinct. But it does kind of remind us that even something as powerful as the church could have vast fluctuations in its fortunes. And of course, so much of this is related to the Reformation, which we're going to talk about. So let's kind of move backwards. I'll give you a kind of panning shot, sort of pulling out from there. Isn't it lovely to try and get some blue sky in there so you can just get that shot kind of framed nicely? We've got a really radiant kind of blue sky today, really kind of clear. And so a kind of modern roof on there, but you've got a medieval church. Oldest parts of this being sort of from the 1320s that you're looking at. Leslie, great. I hope to see you next year. Is it later this year? I forget when you're coming up. So let's walk this way, because last time we went that way. So I'll just give you a sense of where the Minster is in kind of relation to us. So the Minster over there. I'm going to go walk round. But hopefully you can just see into the distance there, right in the middle of your shot, you've got the walls. And in the medieval era, there's another church down there called St Helen on the walls, which has been thoroughly kind of excavated, so demolished. And it was just sat right behind the Merchant Taylor's Hall. And we're going to walk up through sort of Old Walk, go around Oglethorpe, and who knows, we might see one of those cats, the beautiful cat around there, if we're lucky. But it's such a nice day, and there's no rush on this tour, so I'm just going to spend sort of time giving you a kind of feel. And at times I'm going to be quiet. In fact, I'll do it now. I just want you to get a sense of how quiet it is around here. You know, we're right in the middle of the city. There's vibrant pubs and bars, sort of less than 5 minutes walk from here, 3 minutes, 2 minutes walk from here. But there's something about the precinct that has got this silence of the ages. It really is a special place indeed. So the Merchant Taylor's Hall we've visited on occasion. York Unlocked, we actually had a look inside, if you recall. So this was the hall. Yes, do the cat tour again, absolutely. Yeah, we're doing the cat tour on Tuesday, is it? Wednesday, something like that? It's the Merchant Taylor's Hall, one of the guild halls, just at the edge of the precinct. So these were the tailors, very wealthy, of course. York's economy in the medieval era being hugely dependent on textiles and trading. So the tailors, the Merchant Taylors, the guild hall, very, very wealthy. So this house dates from 1415, this guild hall. Isn't that lovely? Look at the contrast of the green, the red brick and the blue sky. That really works for me visually as a kind of combination. The swoop of the grey as well. I think that's fantastic. So let's walk up Old Walk. When we get to the top, we're going to have a monk bar on our right-hand side. A reminder, of course, of the kind of monastic past of this area. So monk bar, one of the four main gateways of York's walls. And again, it's a place we've visited many times on our Walk to the Walls tour. So always trying to kind of knit it together for you. So hopefully by the time you come back to York, Leslie, or anybody that comes to visit in the future, you'll feel like you know it. You'll feel like you can walk it because you've got so many of these sort of jigsaw pieces of this city kind of cemented in your brain. You go, oh yeah, I know what's around the corner. And that's what we try and do, isn't it? Is it make you feel like a local? So that you can sort of enjoy and really kind of drink in, because even though you've seen it before, there's always something new to discover. And that's the fun part, when you're not actually scrutinising a map and you can just look and take in. At times I look at visitors walking on the city, and I think just put down your navigation tools. You don't need them. And I know that's sort of unfair because of course they feel like they do need them, but you can't get lost in York. Stay inside the walls. You find a way back. Eventually, you'll find the Minster or something. Just spend your time, to me, drinking in the experience rather than worrying about where Google says you should be now and next. So, top of Goodrem Gate. There we are. So we've got the interior of Monk Bar on the walls on our right-hand side. And thank you very much, Leslie. I say it's Oglethorpe. Now this was one of the old gateways to the Minster Precinct sat, roughly around the beginnings of the Dutch house here, demolished in 1700. So the precinct was surrounded by walls and gates. And this was to keep the riffraff out, although quite frankly often it kept the riffraff in as well. But this is sort of rather unusual. Lots of movies from New York. Yeah, quite a lot. Yeah, absolutely. TV shows too. So we do get a kind of fair share of that alpha. That's definitely something that happens. They were doing something for the Crown at the Minster a few weeks ago. Gentleman Jack, they're filming here on a fairly regular basis. But yeah, because obviously they need to do less and less. Obviously, once you combine what's already here with some kind of AI to create virtual reality to sort of create bits that are missing, it's pretty easy to sort of turn York back into a city of the past. So yeah, absolutely. So this is, of course, hello Robin, what they call the Dutch house. Something of a one-off in York. It's a house built in the Flemish style. So more likely to see this on Stefan's tours or Mark or Lee. Good folk over in the Netherlands there. So almost certainly a Flemish merchant that was here in York as a trader, missed home and decided to create sort of home from home. So totally one-off. There is no other house like it in the city, Grade 1 listed. It's a lovely place to stay if you've got quite deep pockets. But passing sort of beyond here would have brought us now within the gateways of the Minster Precinct itself. So the precinct was the area that was managed. You'll notice here the old brewery. Church communities and brewing go back throughout the ages, right the way back through history. And of course, Belgium, Trappist monks in Belgium, aren't they terribly famous for kind of brewing beer? And of course, there was a time when it was safer to drink beer than it was to drink the water, because the water, of course, wasn't purified, it wasn't clean. So beer with very low alcohol levels, like what you call low alcohol beer now, low gravity beer, was brewed. Even children would drink beer because of course it had been boiled and cleaned, and so it's the safest sort of drink. But monks were almost always involved in making beers, ciders, meads, big beekeepers as well. So wherever you have monastic communities, which of course you had here in York, religious communities, often you'd have brewing as part of that. So coming into, I think, really just a delightfully charming part of the city. And again, let me just be quiet, just listen to this. Can you hear that or not hear that, rather? That's right, kill the bugs. Tish, I didn't know that, a monk invented champagne. But a lot of these were by accident, weren't they? How quiet that is. I'll tell you, we are right in the city centre. It's such a lovely area, such a lovely part of York. It is, and it just kind of reminds us, doesn't it? So if you've got sort of deep pockets, you're able to get one of these houses, gated houses, obviously, in the centre here. You really are going to have a very, very peaceful life. So in Chapped House Street, now look at the Chapped House in just one moment. Is that for our first sort of main view of the Minster? Michelle, just really listening for the ambient noise, really, to say that, as I say, we are very, very close to York having a party. It's a big, sunny, early summer, late spring afternoon. The streets are heaving. It's teeming. If I took you in the centre of it, you wouldn't believe how busy it is. But it's just how quiet it is here. There's something about this place that just has this solemnity, this silence, this... Yeah, absolutely, Robin. Listen to the sounds of silence. You don't get that in cities, or not a lot, or not in so many places. So this is the rear of the Treasurer's house. We're in Gray's Court. The famous Gray's Court Hotel is in front of us. And This parts of this build lived in London plains pollarded within an inch of their lives. And of course, this is the famous one we're on the Walk on the Walls, where we see in the gardens, and it's kind of the sort of finest view. That's what we're looking down on here. So Gray's Court, not too long ago, won the finest hotel in England award, and now we've got the rear of the Treasurer's house. This is the cellar down here, where in our ghost tours talk about the Roman soldiers. That was down here. It's the cellars of the Treasurer's house, York's most famous ghost story, 1953 of the Roman soldiers. That happened down there. Oh, expensive, yeah. What do you think, Leslie? I mean, probably not exorbitant, but a treat, should we put it that way. But isn't it just lovely? And again, you see that silence. So quiet, just such a lovely place to come and stay. If you value, it's about quality, isn't it? Quality of experience. But again, just looking at these wonderful clerical residences. That sky is really doing it for me today. The contrast between the white, the red, the blue. It's just wonderful. Very dark, very cold. Yeah, it can be marked, depending on what time you come. But of course, that's part of the fun, isn't it? You kind of want that in a ghost tour, don't you? It doesn't quite feel right, does it? Like a warm, sunny afternoon for 10 ghost stories. But that's all right, Michelle. I'm glad you're here. But do join us where we are rather than at the beginning. Otherwise, you'll be hopelessly confused by what I'm talking about and the questions. So we'll leave behind Gray's Court and we'll have a look at the front of the Treasurer's house, or the side of the Treasurer's house. It looks very Mediterranean today, doesn't it? It's got a glorious hue. And as the light starts to move, hopefully we'll get the golden glint that we get from the magnesium within the limestone. It gets a certain quality of sunlight and it just starts to shine like gold. It's a marvellous thing. Never get bored seeing it, never take it for granted. So our first shot, I'm going to walk all the way around the Minster today, is of the Chapt House side. We're on the north side, and we'll come back and have a look in a moment. So this is the rather delightful gateway of the Treasurer's house, London Plains, yep. And it's where I got married 19 years ago tomorrow. 19 years ago, yeah. Hard to think. So this is where my good lady wife stepped through on that day. So our anniversary tomorrow, which is nice. And we were meant to. Thank you very much. We were meant to have all our photos done. I've probably told this story before, haven't I? On the lawn here. I'll come around and see if we can get from the other side. This, by the way, is a great illustration of it's about road, ground levels rising up, right? Over time, the accumulated detritus sort of builds up. So if you look at the kind of the road level here, but always a bit embarrassing because you never know if you're looking at somebody, but I'll just assume no one's in there. Yeah, I'll give you a quick shufty down there. Can you see if you look through down there, how well you can see? But the chair is several feet below us. So actually the ground floor of the house is way below the street level. And this is what happens in York, is that over time things sort of build up and build up. So consequently you get this mismatch between what's outside and what's inside. You go in a house and you step down, which is unusual. So yeah, so 19 years ago, for about an hour before, it was a lovely day, really sunny. And we thought we would get away with it, but then about 40 minutes before, torrential downpour started, and it wasn't great. And we were really kind of hammering, bouncing off the pavements kind of rain, and so unfortunately, our photos, which were meant to be all out here, went a bit to cock, as you might say. So let me see if I can get my hand through there. Yeah. No, it's a bit tight there. Don't want to drop my gimbal. So we were meant to be out there and have lovely photographs on the lawn, but because of the rain, we had to be inside, which is a shame. So that was what we should have had. We are at the side of the Chapt House. We're on Chapt House Street. This is the Chapter House, and the Chapt House is a kind of really important part of the Minster. It's where the Dean and Chapter meet. So the Dean and Chapter are, if you like, what we call the College of Canons. So they are the people in charge of ecclesiastical matters. So a canon is like a church lawyer. So they are both a doctor of theology or philosophy, but also qualified as a lawyer as well. In canonical law, canon law. Outside here are like kind of circular sort of benches, and they all kind of meet in the chapter house. And the chapter house was completed by 1290, which is the oldest standing part of the Minster. And if you look at it from above, if you look at the sort of shape of the Minster, it's a kind of classic cruciform shape. There's the shape of a crucifix orientated, of course, towards the east, toward Jerusalem. But the chapter house spoils it somewhat, insofar as it's sort of stuck on the edge. And part of that is because the chapter house isn't really kind of part of the fabric of the church. There's like a small corridor that connects it to the main body of the church. But it was built, first of all, as a standalone. And that's kind of reason why it isn't actually a true crucifix. But it's absolutely wonderful. And when it was first opened in 1290, it was the first time, look at this pointed roof, that managed to create a roof like this without a set of things. But also something of an arms race as well. The sort of cities were competing with one another to kind of be more, sort of bigger, higher, greater, more impressive, because in doing so, it drew in the patrons. Because the rich and the wealthy were kind of fed on a diet of kind of statements kind of saying basically the best way to achieve your place in heaven is to tip up very, very generously to support the church. And in turn, the church is using that money to build these great kind of edifices to God and to faith and to kind of Christianity. So, the two sort of go close together. The more successful the English economy is, the more you've got these kind of bigger, more elaborate buildings being built. Whenever you then get sort of periods of contraction in the economy, the first thing to get hit is this kind of ambitious building, because obviously it's reliant on the very super wealthy to kind of fund it. So, this is quite interesting. I'm just going to show you, can't go through it. This is St. Peter. And St. Peter dates from about 1413. And you can just to see, I think there's a zoom in here, I don't know how to do it, so I can't do it. But basically on his right-hand side, he's like holding, you've got his two hands. On the right-hand side, you might just be able to make out the shape of a church. It's like a house. And that is the church, because St. Peter, of course, the rock, the Vicar of Rome, the man who, if you like, was responsible for the Western church development. On one hand, he holds the church. So he began the church, isn't he? On his other hand, the left hand upwards. But that's a really good illustration of the impact of the degrading the features. So what once would have been a beautifully kind of decorative item, over a period of 600 years, loses all shape and form. So let me get this back through without dropping my gimbal, otherwise the tour will be cut very short indeed. And we'll go for a walk in the Minster Gardens and take in again the greenery and the lovely peaceful. I'm just waiting for someone to just get through there on their accessibility scooter, and then we'll come in behind them. A bit difficult on the cobbles. It's not ideal for scooters, but so let's come in. All this was filmed. So this is about filming. Gentleman Jack was filming down here not so long back. Obviously there, little late Georgian, just before the Victorian period. So the kind of houses around here, they're kind of coach and horses down here. So again, it's just all very, very nice. Most of these houses belong to the Minster, one way, shape or form. Traditionally for Minster officials. Now, obviously a lot of in the kind of private rental sector. But isn't it just beautiful around here? I don't think I showed you this last time. So again, get rid of the cars. Stick a coach and horses in there. And it's pretty easy to turn this back into late Georgian England. So interesting, different kind of periods of time. I hope we are fine and dandy, enjoying our time, soaking up the sights of York. Oops, sorry, drop my water there. Be clumsy. So the stone of York is what they call white magnesium limestone. It's quarried at a place called Tadcaster, which is about 10 miles, 11 miles from York. Famous brewing town, very soft water up there, so they brew beer at Tadcaster, several breweries. But also the stone is extracted, and it's the Romans that first began the quarrying up at Tadcaster. Lovely view there of the twin west towers. We'll come back, we'll go over here first and we'll have a look at the old Archbishops Palace. So I grew up in the village of Bishopthorpe, which we've been to on tour, where the Archbishop of York's residence has been since the middle part of the 15th century. But prior to that, it was here in the precincts of the Minster. And so this was the first Archbishop's Palace, which coming into view now here on the screen again. And this also had the Archbishop's Chapel as well, because obviously it was the point of a community of buildings. So in this space here, King Richard III invested his son as Prince of Wales in 1483. You see the great crests of the building, and that problem hopefully will kind of go away. We've got another part of the Archbishop's Palace over here, and lovely set of walls has now been converted into a look here, the new gargoyles. Maybe you'll like the stone carvings. You see here a rather unfortunate man there trapped in the jaws of that monster. Or the bestiary, there were some similar animals. So stone carving obviously characterises this kind of decoration, and it is a very ancient form of kind of decoration. Again, you see here perhaps degrading how it unfortunately it lasts so long, so there's always a requirement. You can sort of see here almost how spindly this looks. This would have been probably it would have been somewhere close to that originally. So if you look at my hand there, and then we go over here and see, you kind of get what erosion looks like, over a period of time. But what can you do? This is sort of nature being exposed to nature. We've got a lovely war memorial at the heart of this, the Coheed Memorial. Put our teeth in today. And is that a penis? Oh, let's have a look. Where are we looking? We'll have to go and have a look. It wouldn't surprise me in the least. There are some very surprisingly... is that what you're thinking of there? I don't think... If that's what you're thinking of, I don't think so. But let's have a look. So let's say in here we appear to have like a tree with grapes, like a vine. He's carrying a bunch of grapes, but he's clearly got his head in the jaws of some kind of demon. And again here, so you can see this guy. It's like a sacrifice, isn't he? You can see he's not like a tall one, is he? Again, definitely head in the jaws, palms down, sort of supplicant, isn't he? So not quite sure what's going on, but it's like some kind of sacrifice of devils. Don't know. Haven't really noticed that before. But anyway, onwards, upwards, sideways, downwards, in and out. Let's go and see some more of the Minster. So we're at the north side of the Minster, and the famous Five Sisters window coming into view in just a moment. The Five Sisters window is fairly unique. It was a medieval window that was first put in place in the 14th century. But it was taken out and kind of rebuilt during the First World War due to damage. And so when it was reconstituted and sort of reopened in the early 1920s, it was called the Five Sisters window. And you'll see in a minute, it's 5 sort of columns of stained glass. So there's 5 windows, all of the kind of same height and the same kind of diameter, the same width, and so same dimensions. Which are coming to view now, just with you, bear with. And so there's your 5 sisters. And it was decided to commemorate, or dedicate rather, this window in the early 1920s to the role women had played in the Great War. And so each of the 5 sisters was said to represent one of the continents. So obviously Europe, North America, Australasia, etc., Africa, South Africa, and so forth. And that women standing shoulder to shoulder, providing both labour, of course, losing sons and so forth, and the kind of support of women to the war effort should be kind of marked. And so, to my knowledge, this is the only tribute anywhere in the world to the role that women played in the Great War of 1914-1918. So that's here at York in the Five Sisters window. So let's continue on around the north side. So we talked about butchers earlier. And I want you to kind of notice as we kind of go along. So buttresses, of course, are part like an exoskeleton of the building. So for those that don't know, a buttress is basically, if you look between the glass, the bits that stick out is a buttress. So it's basically supporting the building. So it allows you to build upwards. You've basically got a support structure in place, okay? And what you have is called a flying buttress, which is going to sit outside, buttress which sits flush to a building. You'll see the archway, so you see the decorative elements, but what's important is the bit behind it. So if you look, just sort of ignore the decorative filial there, and you probably see a brace running at 45 degrees behind each one of those decorative filials, and that's the bit, if you like, that's creating the support. So it runs from the bottom through to the top and provides, as I say, support. So they start to get that sun glint look on the central tower. You can hear the bells. Telling us it's 6 o'clock. And the central tower, unusually, doesn't have decorative filials on top. So if you look at the twin western towers there, you'll see the little fingers pointing up, fingers reaching out to heaven. You don't have that at the central tower. The reason is the money ran out. It was always meant to be there, but by the time it gets to the 1470s, we're in the midst of the War of the Roses, Edward VI's coffers are fairly empty, and his view is just to open it. We've been building it for 250 years. Let's consecrate it at some point in the future. We'll add those decorations. It never happened. So again, another indication is fluctuations of fortunes. But nonetheless, it's still 200 feet in height, the central tower, highest point of the Minster. Deliberately so. The highest point of St Mary's Abbey, its main sort of competitor, was 150 feet. Just build it higher, build it bigger, build it grander. And that way, the rich patrons want to be part of it. And so consequently, the money will come in. But I mentioned about the buttresses and also the facades. As we come round from the north side, the oldest part, which is the Old English perpendicular, and early English Gothic that characterises the north side, you're going to see high Gothic resources obviously to do it, but also the fashions of the day. So you see now how, in effect, we've got the same thing, whilst over here it's plain and functional. Over here you've got something which is altogether a different kind of proposition. So the buttresses are now appear to be integrated into the design and are being used, if you like, to create texture and depth as repositories, of course, for statues, for images, for icons of saints, which of course were removed after the Reformation, moved from being Protestant country to from being Catholic rather to Protestant, and so saints were rather frowned upon. So the statue of the saints went, but you just see the difference in the design work. But of course, what this is it's applied on top of the stone. The fabric within, underneath, is identical. So you've got fascias of stone being applied to create the kind of decorative element of it. So it's like icing on a cake. So it looks like some kind of event is happening. So I'm not going to outstay our welcome here. But you'll see there's 3 statues above the west door, which is the main entrance, where the Archbishop will come in. In the centre, you've got the Archbishop, who's holding the first church, Wolfstan, because there's an earlier church on this spot. And then on the left-hand side, you've got the stonemason who donated the stone in exchange, no doubt, for a place in heaven. On the right-hand side, you've got the master mason who provided his services, sort of costs, as you might say, to get the whole thing done. So you've got 3 people there that are not saints, but it have earned their place in creating the church, providing the stone, the services, and of course, being the person that can pull together the commitment to do it. We've got our very recent statue of the late Queen, Elizabeth II, is now a part of the fascia. So it's changing all the time, the Minster. It's never kind of stood still. It's always been kind of one thing. Over the centuries, of course, it's evolved and changed. And of course, every time new work is done, new stonework going in, it's subtly different to what was there sort of previously. So it is an evolutionary building. But look at that sky now. Is that looking quite something? Again, that's sort of like contrast, isn't it, in our photography and videography. capturing shades and tones and contrast, giving kind of space to feel and kind of breathe. And postcards are such these days, but nonetheless, it's good to think of it in those kind of visual terms. So we're going to sit and we're going to have a look at the south side. So Michael Belfry Church in front of us, which of course is the church famous for being the baptismal home of Guy Fawkes. So this side of the Minster is perhaps one you might be most familiar with. The south side, the south transept sticking out. So the roof that you're looking at right in the centre of your picture is where the fire hit in 1984. So in July 1984, there was a lightning strike. There was a lighting rig up there. In the mystery plays. So York Festival was on. So there's a gantry up on that roof. New bosses, they're like the wooden sort of holders, the joints. And so if you now go and look at the roof of the south transept, there's actually quite a lot of modern elements in it, because it was a way of not trying to recreate the old. It was to put in something new that referenced our kind of times. So that was good. So again, views of the central tower. It's a very good image over here. That gives a sense of the central nave. So this is what the church looks like. So we're looking down now from the altar end. So the edge of this picture where I'm stood, if you like, would be the east end of the church. You're looking down the nave to the west end. So that's the big west end minster window we were just looking at from the other side just a moment ago. And I'll tell you what was amazing. In the year 2000, for the millennium, they took all the furniture out. And so you got to experience it as it would have been for medieval pilgrims. Because church furniture is quite a new thing. We think of it as sort of being the norm. You go in church, sit down, be quiet, behave yourself. But actually, that was a Reformation thing. Because until the Reformation, church services were in Latin. You weren't meant to understand them. The whole point was just going there to have communion. It didn't take that long, to be honest. It's only when it went into English, and of course then sort of sermons, so these kind of instructions about how to lead the good life. Your weekly lessons on a Sunday. Before that just didn't exist. So didn't have furniture. So sitting in pews or in chairs is the idea of the Reformation. It's not on the original Catholic situation. Hand pink waving? I don't know what that means. Is the chat still coming through? It seems to sort of slowed right up at my end. But anyway, hope maybe it's just a gog with here. So it's about the gateways, sort of carving off the various kind of areas. I don't know, boys. It's weird because I'm not getting anything onto buffering, which is kind of, unusual, isn't it? So I'll have to watch this afterwards and try and work out what's happening. But it could be just very, very busy. I've lost John too. That's maybe why. I apologise. I'll keep walking and hopefully we can walk into better signal areas. But there's nothing on here it's really weird. Still yet to understand. Try out a few different texts. So Constantine statue, Roman Emperor, proclaimed here in York in the year 306 AD. So he was the son of the Roman Emperor, and he was the commander-in-chief of the Roman forces. He was in charge of the 9th Legion here at York. Sorry, the 6th Legion, not the 9th Legion, the 6th Legion. And so his father was Roman Emperor. His father came here to visit in the year 306, but then took ill and died. So whilst he was here, Constantine was proclaimed emperor. So that was here in York in the year 306, which is why his statue is here. So I'll keep moving on. So hopefully I don't want to lose anybody. That seems careless, doesn't it? As you can see, buffering swapping. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Is this whole thing? I'm going to try it not on Streamlabs next time and just see what happens. Because the first time I did it on YouTube, it worked beautifully. And then it was a nightmare, and it's just, don't know. We'll figure it out, but maybe we'll say Hago to give us the app. Work our way through that way. Picture's fuzzy now. Picture's very clear. It's weird, isn't it? It sort of seems like simultaneously we're getting people with different experiences, which is kind of odd, isn't it, really, why that would be. It's hard to know. It's either a poor signal or it's not, but hey-ho. So scaffolding, yeah, so Leslie, what's happening here is just routine maintenance, basically. As you can see here, we're just by the mason's yard. So this is the area, obviously, where you've got people that are working all year round on basically creating replacement pieces. So you can see here, with a gargoyle again up close, we can see a demon there with thank you, Cheryl. The frog coming out his mouth. Look, he's holding a fish, and you can see there between his legs, there's a little man between his legs. Over here, we've got a chap that sort of starts to look, he looks a bit angry, but sort of normal-ish, you'd say. But sort of travel down, you'll see actually he's got a tail, which is a less normal, and then he's got claws for toes as well. So again, he is a grotesque, he's a gargoyle. And of course, the point of this was, and that will sit flat. I mean, right now it's sat upwards. If you look at the angle that gargoyles are up on the side, that'll actually be flat. So he'll be sticking outwards, kind of 90 degrees from the building. And gargoyles stemmed from a time where people genuinely believed that the devils were a thing. That you had your saints who were like kind of superheroes, like Marvel, right? Your saints would kind of come in and help you, but the demons and sprites were very, very real. I mean, that is the literal reading of the Bible, right? Jesus goes to the desert, doesn't he? And the devil tries to tempt him. The devil owns the earth. He makes it clear. How can the devil offer Christ the earth who didn't own it in the first place? So the Bible is crystal clear on this. It is the realm of devils and imps and sprites. People believe this fervently in the medieval era. So the gargoyles were to scare these devils and sprites away from the churches. But they also were just water spouts. So you pray to your superhero saints to kind of protect you. That was the kind of the role that they played. The kind of nearest sort of sense of is having your favourite superhero as a guy that can protect you. So everything was orientated around this idea of salvation, of faith, and none more so in the erection of the east wind. So we're coming to the end of the south side now. So this is just routine maintenance. There's no kind of nothing bad happening other than over time it needs replacing. So any section of the Minster you look at, you'll see is a mixture of could be a ferret biting, couldn't it? Of fairly recent stone. You'll see here at the centre, so a slightly older stone there at the bottom, and a pretty some original stone here in the middle. It's evolving all the time. It's like the story, isn't it, about having a broom for 30 years. There is 6 new handles and 3 new heads. So at what point does it become a replacement or inauthentic? It doesn't really, because it's a rolling program of maintenance. So the Great East Window is probably the high point of the building works of York Minster. This east elevation is probably the high watermark of Gothic cathedral building anywhere, certainly in England, possibly in Europe, which you pull across, which get you a nice kind of shot of that. Very difficult to get into one shot, but the further back we go, the more you're going to get. And I think it is unbelievably harmonious to run across, the kind of very much reminds me of King's College Chapel in kind of Cambridge, but let's move backwards and just try and get in as much of the vista as possible, because this is the largest expanse of medieval stained glass window anywhere in the world, put in between 1405 and 1408. It was an absolute kind of triumph of medieval ambition and architecture. You've got to recognise that at this point in time, they're all challenging one another to build higher and wider. The integrating design and architecture enables them to build on this kind of scale. So you get these huge expanses of glass. But of course, the glass itself is built by minute, perhaps minute, but very small fragments, all hand painted, all hand stained, coming together. And so at the top third of this window is God in his heavens, the archangels, the orders of heaven. And the second 2/3 is the end of days. It's the apocalypse. It's the apocalypse of St. John, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the end of the world. So really kind of scary scenes to really kind of keep people into line. But it all adds up. I think the further back you go, particularly once you start to bring in St. William's College, we'll talk about just in one moment, to sort of create a harmonious vista that really kind of can't be beaten. We'll talk about the college in just 1 minute, but let me just kind of pull back and try and give you a sense of this elevation. Then we're getting the chapped house there coming into view as well. Walking backwards, never a good idea when you're live touring. Windows are spectacular, aren't they? Now look at that. How is that for a view? I mean, it really is quite something. And so this window was put in at absolutely exorbitant cost. And the money was earned by the guys that lived here at St William's College. And these were the Vicus choral. They were chantry priests. And chantry, from Latin cantare, to sing, were people who sang masses for the dead. There was 24 elected vicars. And they had a very troublesome past. We'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, there was a belief that once somebody died, it was very rare that somebody would go to heaven or hell. You'd have to be a real kind of sinner or a saint for that. Most people go to a place called purgatory. And purgatory was a kind of clearinghouse whereby you'd be purified by fire. You weren't bad enough to go to heaven, bad enough to go to hell. You weren't ready for heaven. So basically, you go through this period of purification where at the end of it, when Judgment Day came, your soul would be weighed. If your soul was heavier than your sins, you go to hell. If it was lighter than your sins, you go to heaven. So consequently, purgatory was a place of sort of torment, not quite hell, but certainly it's not nice. Kind of dentist waiting room, with kind of music playing. You got toothache, and it's that sort of low level kind of irritant constantly. And so, what was believed was you could what they call intercede. You could pray on other people's behalves, and so the monks and the clerics that lived here were employed to sing masses for the dead. That's why cantare, to sing, chantry priests. They sang masses for the dead. So this was the College of the Chantry Priests. It was founded in 1461. The major patron was Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who was going to become King Richard III in York. And it was going to be a step up because the Vicus choral had previously been notorious for their poor behaviour. At one time, believe it or not, somewhere in the region of 1 in 4 men were under holy orders. The church basically offered secure employment. But as a result, of course, what that meant was that lots of people that were in the employment of the church weren't especially what you might call all that holy, all that pious. And unfortunately, working as a chantry priest, because although these were elected, they would then sort of sublet the jobs, it was a bit of a kind of call centre kind of job. You're singing prayers all day for people you've never met. And bear in mind, the wealthy were so paranoid about not getting their place in heaven, they might leave money for 50,000 masses to be sung after their death for them and their families. So, of course, it's pretty routine. It's pretty dull work. And so the people who get to do it aren't really the most gifted. They are simply available. And so the Vicus choral, who, if you like, filled in the gaps and kind of did the work on a day-to-day basis, their college was originally down here. So we're going to pass through the only remaining gateway of the Minster Precinct. We've got a lovely sort of canopy sort of coming over the road here. The National Trust property, you can stay here. So if you're looking for a very cute holiday in the centre of York, so hopefully you can sort of see now what I was talking about earlier, how busy it is around here. And again, I've not heard from you while, so I don't know if your signal's kind of dropped or I'm not going to pick you up, but hopefully you'll pick me up as I keep walking along. So this was the gateway of the Minster Precinct. I'll come around this side to hopefully be able to get a sense of what that looks like. Oh, fantastic, Trish. So before the Vicus choral moved into the walls, rather inside the walls of the Minster Precinct, because the walls would have run sort of basically the kind of look at the way that road goes down there. That would have been the wall. So this is you get a gateway here, little gatehouse above. You actually see where the gates would have been. You see where the little indentations here, where the hinges of the actual gates would have been. These kind of medieval timbers. So that would have been a wall going around. And of course, within the Minster, you got lots of valuables. Yes, from the church, yeah, absolutely. So what you basically had was all this gold and silver and priceless stuff within the Minster. So consequently, they had walls to protect it. They didn't want anybody just wandering in. So originally, the Vicus choral lived down here, and I'll show you where that is just in just a minute. But they were notorious, the Vicus choral, who were these guys who were it's like call centre work really. They were being paid to sing masses for the dead. But they weren't really that bothered about it all. They were much more interested in what's happening in the street, because this area here, just at the corner of Bedern and the Minster Precinct, was a tourist area for vice. York was full of pilgrims, people coming here to get spiritual atonement, and they're going to spend big while they're here because they're trying to buy their way into heaven. But it also meant that the temptation was always there. And the church were always very relaxed about this. There is no kind of redemption without sin, isn't there? So it's quite common for bishops to run brothels. So basically, whatever you wanted was available in this area, whether that was men or women or whatever, gambling, drinking, you name it, that was available right here. The problem is that, of course, you had the Vicus choral, who were, let's take you down and show you where the Vicus choral she hung out. So this is their chapel where they prayed and worked. Now the Bedern Chapel, the stained glass centre, and their refectory is round the corner. So of course these are all single fellas, so they all kind of came together and ate sort of collectively. So the Vicus choral we know about through court rolls. One of the great sources of history for those who have kind of dug in, particularly for family history. You've got a rogue in your family, it's great because you can find out all their transgressions, because every time they do something wrong, it appears in records, right? When they get fined or imprisoned or punished or whipped or whatever, those sort of records often kind of still exist. So this is the refectory. This is where the monks would come together and have their daily meals and eat. So what we know is from the records is that these monks were forever getting caught in flagrante, as you might say, in liaison, in passionnel, with kind of ladies of ill repute, being caught gambling, drinking, fighting, you name it. They were absolute rogues to a man. And so there's lots and lots of records of this kind of criminality, antisocial behaviour, immoral behaviour, whatever you want to describe it, in the York Court records. And quite frankly, the magistrates are getting sick to the back teeth of the Vicus choral, because rather than, this is where they're kind of coming and eating, and then of course after they've eaten they should be going back to the Minster, right, to pray. Yep. So you think backwards and forwards all day, right? Sleeping here, get up, go to the church, say some prayers, come back, have a meal, go back across to the backwards and forwards, right? So every time they go backwards and forwards, they are of course encountering the temptations of the street, of the vice, of these smiling, knowing ladies. And the other thing with the Vicus chorals is because they were spending all their time saying prayers for the dead. People coming giving them money all the time. Say a prayer for my dad, right? Say a prayer for my wife. You can imagine, it's because the currency of salvation is prayer by clerics. So constantly there are people putting money into their hands all day long, all the time. Should be going to the church, of course, but who knows, who cares, when you can just nip around the corner, have a quick assignation, and spend somebody's soul money, So it's a real problem for the church. It was a real kind of public relations issue. And so they came up with a really neat solution as to how to get these guys backwards and forwards from the Minster to their refectories and place of sleep without crossing the street. So if you have a look at the blue door here, and then you look up above, and you can see a bit of an outcrop. And the outcrop is all that remains now of a bridge that was built. So the bridge was built across the top of this road. So it would have gone right across here and finished up over on this side. This isn't medieval, but it's a replacement building. Because by building a bridge over the streets, they could then get these vicars, these clerics, from their place of food to their place of prayer, without having dalliance with the ladies of ill repute. So you think sex scandals in the church is new? You're kidding yourself. It is as old as the hills. There's always been sex scandals in the church. But I think it's a particularly wonderful way of doing it, sort of practical and sort of pragmatic, is put them out of temptation's way. The church, Michelle, I guess, Michelle, you're asking me about the brothels. Yes, sort of. So it's certainly there to make money. It's certainly one of the privileges of being a bishop. You could license brothels. But also because you had a system that was very much all focused on, I think the right way to put it, it's based on sin and redemption. So without sin and temptation, then being abstemious has no merit, does it? It's like if you were in a house that was completely empty, and you were a burglar and you didn't steal anything because there's nothing to steal, does that make you a good person? So consequently, it's like putting a burglar in a house where there's lots of things they can steal. Yeah? So then seeing how you deal with temptation. There's a very famous monk called St. Anthony, one of the very, very first hermits in Alexandria in the desert, and tried to become like a hermit in the 4th century. And he thought, well, you're still going to have temptation here because there's nothing to tempt me. So consequently, he paid for naked nubile girls to parade in front of him and dance and do kind of gymnastics in front of him all day long so that he could resist. Because without the temptation, there's no vindication, if that kind of makes sense. So part of the reason for the brothels run by the church was to actually see how well people could follow the commandments about adultery and so forth. So people being put to the test. And unfortunately, most of them failed, it has to be said. But well, that's something. So St. William's College is named after St. William. So St. William was the grandson of King Stephen, the great-grandson of King William I, William the Conqueror. That's his crest here, the gold shield with the 7 chevrons. Next door to him is the cross keys of St. Peter. St. Peter, which is the keys of the church. And St. William himself was a cleric. He was appointed to be Archbishop of York. But there was a dispute. The Archbishop of York, of course, was very wealthy. He had an awful lot of revenues. And so there was a lot of competition for these jobs being handed out. And so it was disputed. And 3 times he was said, no, you haven't got the job. And then finally, when he was appointed to the job on a final time, when he came back to York as the newly appointed Archbishop, people came out to Ouse Bridge to greet him, to cheer him on. And there were so many people on the bridge collapsed and fell into the water. And in those situations, you would expect multiple people to drown. But William did a prayer, everyone was saved, nobody drowned. So consequently, this is put down as his first miracle. The second miracle was he was then buried in a tomb inside the church. And there was then a fire. And it was found that the whole area around him was completely destroyed. When they opened his tomb, not only was his body totally undamaged, who was that with the naked? That was Anthony. St. Anthony. His body was smelling sweetly. It hadn't decomposed at all. It was a sweet aroma as it going. And so again, it was decided that this was evidence of the fact that this guy was a saint. And then very, very sort of quickly afterwards, people started to come to William, sort of the outcomes they wanted, and so he becomes a saint. So he's canonised after those 2 miracles. So I think we're just about up on the hour. Have I missed any questions along the way? I don't want to overstay my welcome. Thank you for being buffering, and there's other places you want to go to. So, is there any questions that I've missed along the way? I'll just flick myself around. I hope you've enjoyed a little spin around the Minster. Minster 360, as you might say. But as I say, the thing to just recognise and understand, is, as I say, it's this complex of buildings. It's not just one building. It's interdependent of different kind of functions that are kind of being carried out. Everything from places where the clerics would sleep, where they pray, where they eat, as well as, of course, the place where they kind of pray and where they can encounter the public and deal with it. So lots of churches, lots of colleges, and lots of evidence of naughtiness on behalf of the clergy. It's always good fun, isn't it? So I do hope you've enjoyed your time. I've always enjoyed myself together. We're next in York on, I think it's Tuesday evening, I think, or Wednesday, I forget which. But we're doing Cats. Again, it's the first time this is the first time I've repeated this tour. I don't repeat tours very often because I've got a sort of low boredom threshold. So I always like doing new stuff. But it's good to repeat from time to time. And I'll better have a look on YouTube, see what the buffering situation looks like from my end. But as I say, I haven't had anything indicating, because normally what you get is like whirring or something to indicate that the latency is an issue. Haven't had that today. But of course, my experience of yours might be completely different. So what I'll know is, of course, when the video goes and what it looks like. So I apologise for any kind of delays. Hopefully it hasn't harmed it. And if it is a nice clean video, you can always go back and watch the video online on YouTube and hopefully get a better experience, even if it was a bit laggy today. But thank you for sticking with us. We will find solutions to these issues. But what's lovely is, I was looking at the calendar today, I think for the first time today, over 20 tours listed on the central calendar, which is fantastic. More guides joining all the time. So lots aren't, and that's fine, that's up to them. But I think increasingly people are seeing the central shared calendar as being the one-stop shop. And the good news is we're investing in developing a better calendar, be easier to use, not have to rely on Google Mail, all this sort of stuff we had before, based on a website that's coming pretty soon. So sit tight, do stay with us, and we'll hopefully find it. Hi, Patty. We'll hopefully be able to find it an improved experience from there onwards. So thank you from York. I'm going to go for a nice cold beer. And absolutely, time for a beer. Thank you, Charlotte. You just put the words right in my mouth. And so I'll see you all very, very soon. And hopefully next time talking about those little critters, the kittens. So happy anniversary. Thank you very much. Thank you. I shall see you very, very soon. So thank you. Bye-bye.